When I was a kid, I used to entertain the kids in my neighbourhood with the girl across the road in my backyard. And what we were doing was we were mimicking the songs that we had seen on television, and they were pretty crummy videos back then, so it wasn't too hard to mimic them really. But what we did was we would record using a cassette tape of 3XY, some of you will remember 3XY, and we would set up in our backyard, and we had a repertoire of only 2 songs, and our signature tune was A Glass of Champagne by Sailor. And I was the guy on the piano, tapping out the opening riff there. And we'd entertain our friends that way. Now, I don't know if what sufficed for entertainment in my neighbourhood was being played out in neighbourhoods all over Melbourne, but I suspect similar sorts of flights of fancy were. Perhaps the only difference being that in my neighbourhood, I lived in a lower socio-economic demographic area, and the schools that I attended were schools that received disadvantaged school funding. Now, I don't want you to go out and start playing the violins for me right now, because I had a really, really rich childhood fueled by really strong connections with family and friends. And I really, really loved my childhood, and I love my teachers, and I love my schools. But what I did find was that as I was growing up, equity issues started playing out around me. And when you told people that you went to the local high school that I went to, it really determined your place in the world. My early classrooms were full of chalk dust, and rows of desks that still had those ink files on them, because we weren't using them, we had pens, but that was the nature of those classrooms in those days. But what was really rich in my classrooms was teacher voice. I had wonderful, wonderful teachers, and their strongest instrument by far was their voices. And they fired my imagination, and they recognised something in me that I was so glad that they found, and that was this little information junkie that I was. I would just soak up ideas and look for ways of finding out as much as I possibly could about anything. And of course, once they'd seeded an idea in me, I went then and explored it via the only means I had, which was mainstream media at the time, and so the books that were on my school and local library shelves. But I loved my school and I loved my education. In fact, I loved it so much that when I graduated from Teachers College, I got a job at the local high school that I attended as a teenager. And it was there that I worked for many, many years, teaching kids who often resisted the demands of curriculum, but knew when somebody was extending a hand to them and cared about them. I was a very proudly passionate state school educator, and I really, really didn't like it when I went to conferences and I would see private school teachers stand up and tell me how and what I should teach. Go get a real job, that's what I thought. But as I approached 40, I found my passion flagging, and it was getting tougher to teach in that school. So I decided to sort of look elsewhere and look at different career options. So I got myself a job at the private school up the hill, the school that I had vowed my daughter would never attend. And when I crossed over, because that's what it felt like I was crossing over to the dark side, I really felt like I was selling out. I felt like I was no longer able to make a difference, really. And I felt that I was really making, well, the equity that I had, you know, things that I had felt that were so important, I felt like I was just robbing myself of that, and I really was troubled by what I'd done, and I struggled with it. But what I discovered really early on, when I made that shift, was that all of a sudden I had an opportunity to really think about teaching and learning, because I wasn't dealing with classroom management and survival on a day-to-day basis anymore. I was in classrooms where I could teach, and I was in classrooms where every kid in that room had a laptop computer. This is a one-to-one laptop school. And in 2005, one of the first classes that I ever taught there, I had a moment that really has defined my existence for the last 7 years. I was teaching a group of Year 9 students. We were looking at Romeo and Juliet and analysing their tragic demise. And at the end of the lesson, I worked in groups, and at the end I said, okay, I'd like you to come up and nominate a person to come up to the board and write down your answers here, what you've come up with. And the girl in the class raised her hand, and she looked at me and she said, rather sneeringly I might add, "Oh, can't we just email each other what we've done?" I thought, okay. Well, of course they could. But for me, a teacher who'd only learned how to create a folder in Word a couple of years before, this was a bit of a revelation. And that moment sort of defined me, and I really decided right then and there, God, I need to upskill, and I need to upskill fast. So I set about going on my journey. I started looking at journals and listservs, looking for answers, trying to find out what it was that I needed to do to become an effective teacher in this environment. And I kept hearing this word, or these words, Web 2.0, and the idea, the notion of a read-write web. And I sort of got it, but I really didn't have a handle on it. And then in 2007, I got this opportunity to go to a conference. And at this conference, they were offering a 5-hour workshop where you got to learn about Web 2.0 tools with some guy from America called Will Richardson. Go figure. And for me, that was really one of those light bulb moments. I came out of that workshop getting it. I understood what connected learning could possibly look like. I left that workshop and I started to read educational blogs. And within months, I was writing my own. What I discovered was a world full of teachers. And I'm talking about a world here. I'm not talking about just teachers here in Australia. A world full of teachers who were sharing what was happening in their classrooms. And I was learning from them. In fact, I had become a learner for the first time in a very, very long time. And I was giving right back. Things that were happening in my class, I was sharing with them. It was an amazing time, and I felt completely revolutionised. In fact, I returned to my school in 2008, and I was really like a technology evangelist. And believe you me, evangelism is not the way to go with this kind of thing. Because this is 2008, and what's becoming my mainstream at that time is everybody else's nerdy weird. So I decided that perhaps backing off a bit from the evangelism was probably something I needed to do. But that didn't mean I didn't start affecting change, because we did. And it was a we thing, it wasn't a me thing. It was with other teachers too who were willing to work with me. So we started to use things like Nings and wikis and Google Docs, things like that that actually changed the boundaries of our classroom walls, and things that allowed us to work with our students beyond the time constraints of our classroom. And all the time I was sharing through that WordPress blog that became my conduit to the world. And I felt like I was making a difference, that I was making a difference for myself, I was making a difference for my students, and I was making a difference for other teachers out there. Now, it seems to have taken to me an unbearably long time for what has been my mainstream for quite some time to become everybody else's mainstream, and for social networks in particular to gain some acceptance out there. And as our world transitions, because that is what's happening, our world is transitioning, there's a pressing need for education to respond to this. We really can't be held back by unfounded fears about our kids working and sharing and displaying what they're capable of in online spaces. There are plenty of our kids doing this stuff already, and many of them are doing it outside of the boundaries of education. But there are plenty who aren't doing it well too, and we know that. We know that there are kids posting inappropriate things online. We know that there's inappropriate videos, photos, ill-thought-out comments. And these kids really do not have an understanding of the permanency of digital scars that don't fade with time. And we can ill afford to have a future, one that Jonathan Zittrain talks about, where our kids may have to, in the future, declare reputation bankruptcy because they have made so many errors along the way that they just can't move forward. That they can't get careers working for themselves because there's too much that's Googled about them that can be found. We need to start ensuring that we start to allow our students to create their digital footprints at school, within learning experiences and not outside them. We need to start allowing for search engine optimisation for life. But how do we do this? Do we really have enough teachers in our schools today with a skill set and the capacity to be able to create mindful digital citizens? Do we have enough teachers who understand what it means to shape a digital footprint? Do we have enough teachers who understand what it means to look after your privacy and establish balance in an always-on world? There really just aren't enough teachers like this in our schools today. And those that do exist, people like me, we've spent countless and unimaginably long hours of our lives working outside of our school day in teacher networks, trying to understand the shift that's happening and how it applies to teaching and learning. Effectively, what we've done is we go to our jobs and we do our full-time jobs, and then we come home and we're doing a full-time job at home, trying to upskill ourselves, to get ourselves keeping abreast of things so we can take that back to our school and implement the kinds of changes that we want to see happening. Now, that's not a sustainable model for anybody. It's robbing our families of precious time with their loved ones. It's robbing me of precious time with the children that I love. Our profession is ill-equipped right now with bodies on the ground and with school administrations who are not necessarily seeing the need to nurture and grow teachers who are like this in their schools and giving them the time that they need to do it. We've actually, we've seen our Australian government spend millions of dollars on the digital education revolution, and that's admirable. I think that's a fabulous thing that's happened. But we're providing a lot of access and infrastructure and some professional development. And we're seeing a growing call in our communities now for bring your own technology so that we can get access moving out even more broadly. What I'd like to propose is that we actually need to see a growing call for this, for bring your own network teacher to schools, because that's what we need. We need network teachers in our schools, teachers who have an understanding of how you create meaningful learning experiences using the technology that we now have in schools today. That's the important thing, that's what we need. And developing this skill set requires some forethought and planning from our government institutions, from our teacher training institutions, and from school administrations to shape and grow these people. It really shouldn't be a random luck of the draw thing that a kid sits in a classroom and gets that kind of new way of doing things because of a teacher's skill set. And nor should it be that inequities in our system enable some kids to get this and others to not. We need to ensure that this next generation, that we arm them to become people who are creative, responsive, adept learners who can function in a knowledge economy using the tools of today. Now, I'm a parent. I'm not just an educator. So I see this through two lenses. And I really do think that as parents, I think some of us need to start challenging our assumptions that we hold about teaching and learning. Many of those sorts of assumptions have been based on the experiences we had when we went to school and the way that we were taught. We need to acknowledge that the world is different today and that there are different ways of creating meaningful learning experiences. And we need to support teachers in schools to do this kind of work. And this needs to be a school-home nexus thing. This needs to be something where we're working together in partnership. We need those open dialogues between our communities and our teachers. And we need parents at home talking to their kids about how they use technology meaningfully, just like we do in schools today. Now, at my school, we have school blogs for students from at the moment, years 7 through to 11. And our students are using these as e-portfolios. And this has been a planned, calculated move on our behalf to do this, because we want to ensure that our students leave our school with a positive digital footprint. We're encouraging our students to post the great things that they're doing in their classrooms, the things that they're interested in, their co-curricular activities. We're encouraging them to express their voice and find their voices in their spaces. And we're seeing some amazing development with some students who have really taken to this. What we're doing is we're facilitating search engine optimisation for life. Now, when I was a child, I was a voracious reader. And I wanted to do nothing more than to make contact with the authors of the books that I read. But I could no sooner do that than I could hop on a plane and go and knock on their front door. Last year, one of our students wrote a blog post about Ellie, a Holocaust memoir. And in that blog post, she wrote a letter to Ellie Friedman, where she told her how much she admired her for everything that she had endured and how she had handled herself throughout that horrible, arduous experience. It was an incredibly articulate letter, beautifully written. This year, a comment came through on that blog post from somebody outside of our school community. It was from Livia Bitten-Jackson. Now that struck a chord when I saw that name, and I went to the shelf of our school library and I picked up the copy of Ellie and I had a look at the cover, and it was written by Livia Bitten-Jackson. So I did an IP address search, and the comment emanated from Israel. I sent Livia an email. I said, hi Livia, are you Livia Bitten-Jackson who wrote the Holocaust memoir Ellie? Because I'm a teacher and you've left a comment on one of our students' blogs and I need to verify if this is genuine. And she replied really promptly and said yes, she was the Livia Bitten-Jackson, and she had discovered our students' blog and she was really touched by the words that she had expressed in that letter to her. And she wanted our student to know that she was an amazing young lady. Our student was amazed. She didn't think anything like that was possible. She'd read that book because her mother told her it was a special book to read. She'd read it when she was a child. I was amazed. He was the reverse of what I had ever thought was possible. He was an author reaching out to a student to let the student know that the student's words had affected her. That's what's possible when you allow students to write in online spaces for audiences wider than just their teacher. You know, teacher voice really, really matters. It matters just today, just as much as it did when I was a kid, when I was in rooms that weren't dominated by computing technology. I think that we need to acknowledge now that our voice can extend not just to the students that we teach, but to other teachers out there. Teacher educators, educators in schools beyond the walls of the school that we occupy. And I think we need to acknowledge that we can create a bit of a movement here, a grassroots leadership movement amongst teachers. We can be working together in collaborative communities of practice. We can be sharing ideas, we can be sharing thinking. We do not have to wait for some top-down directives to come to us and tell us what's the way to go. We can be working together, making that happen by ourselves. We need to really see teaching as a collaborative pursuit and not a competition played out on the my school side. Our experiences do shape us, and our experiences of teachers shape us, and really we can't afford to have a teaching population that becomes irrelevant using the tools of a different age. Our kids aren't sitting in their backyards anymore tapping away on fake keyboards, entertaining the neighbourhood. What they're doing is they're using webcams, they're using their phones, they're uploading content to YouTube. They're putting their rotten, horrible lip syncing out there, but sometimes they're putting out their amazing voices and they're looking for audiences who'll listen to them and potentially widen their reach far beyond their neighbourhood. We've got kids who are creating screencasts, who are teaching kids how to level up to the next stage of the game. We've got kids learning code, we've got kids creating apps. And then we've got some amazing kids. We've got kids who are doing some things like becoming Earth Watchers. These are kids who are monitoring small tracts of land in the Borneo rainforest, looking for signs of illegal activity. And they're doing that because they know that that rainforest houses those orangutans that they love. And they want to see them live through to the next generation. And some of these kids are supported by wonderful teachers like Chris Gauthier up in Brisbane, whose science class is now a team of Earth Watchers watching these parcels of land. And those kids are fiery and passionate about what they're doing because they believe they're doing something for a really, really fantastic cause, which of course, that's exactly what it is. Our experiences and circumstances do shape us. They've shaped me into being a teacher who wants to give back and share. I'm still that little girl in that backyard, tapping away on the keys of that fake piano, except now the keys that I tap away on are in the form of a QWERTY keyboard, and my repertoire is far bigger than 2 songs, and my reach extends far wider than my immediate neighbourhood. If we're looking at the greatest level of our time, and I think we just might be, then we need a teaching profession who understands this. We don't know where the next truly great innovators are. They might be sitting in your classroom. They might be in that disadvantaged school up the road. That no longer has to determine their place in the world. Let's make our profession a truly noble one. Let's make sure that every little information junkie out there, every little kid sitting in every classroom has the opportunity to maximise their potential. Our students deserve this. Our teachers can rise to it because our future depends on it.